Okay, let's talk about a little bit about back pain and how it's related to how you can move your hips. Being able to move your hips in all of the ways is very, very, very important for long-term health of the lower back. When you lose hip mobility, the hips are meant to be very mobile joints. When you create stiffness in that joint, the next system up, which is meant to be fairly stable, okay, so that's my lower back, is now going to become more hypermobile. Meaning that if I can't push my hips back because I don't have good hip mobility, instead I'm going to use my lower back all the time, my lower back's going to kill me. So learning to use your hips in all the ways that it's meant to be used can be very challenging. So let's walk through that. When you figure out which ones you're not good at, work at them all the time. For the most people, it's anterior pelvic tilt, posterior pelvic tilt, or twerking is really challenging for people, especially guys with small hip structures. So things I should be able to do with my hips. Push one side, push the other. Most people, especially women, post or put all of their weight on one leg, okay? So they'll do things like this, or that. Now here's the thing, it's not necessarily terrible for you unless you're only doing one side excessively all the time. I think most people should be in a springy stance all the time, but a little bit of posting is okay. I tend to post to my left, meaning I'm putting 80% of my body weight onto my left leg and about 20% onto my right leg. That causes problems. That tightens up this hip flexor, overstretches the IT band and the hip complex, makes this nice and tight into here, and then I get my hip being thrown out of whack. So if you've ever gone to the physio and say, well, your hip is tilted, twisted, hiked, all that kind of stuff, check if you're doing things like this. Okay, but I should be able to go from one side to the other. What you're looking for is, can I move it evenly, or does it feel like it's evenly tense? Because if you post a lot, you'll be like, ooh, yeah, that's real easy. Yeah, I'm doing it. No, you're not. Because you got out here, but you only got there on the other side. Can you get it even on both sides? Okay, I'm not really bending my knees. So that's hip shifting. Hip hiking. Can I lift one and the other? Okay, so my pelvis is moving up and down through my ankles, because sometimes this can lead to hiking. And what it looks like is a pelvis that's out of whack. That hurts. You shorten the QL, you shorten other muscles in the lower back, that when you go to reach for something, that one is higher, is super tight, because that pelvis is elevated all the time. So I should be able to raise one, raise the other. Okay? I should be able to move my pelvis that way. Here's the big one. Anterior and posterior pelvic tilt, especially if you're stuck in one or the other. So I'm going to show you this way. I tend to be stuck in what's called anterior pelvic tilt, okay, or lordosis. So if I stand here, I tend to stand with a little bit of an excessive curvature in my lower back. That leads to what can look like a poochy belly. Okay, whether you have fat there or not, it doesn't matter. It's going to look extremely poochy if I'm arching my back excessively. If I was to flatten my back, I would flatten my abs. Okay? Now, kyphosis is here, that's quite different. Now, picture the pelvis as a bucket of water. If it was neutral, or my pants, okay, so if I took my pants and I made them level because my pelvis was neutral, water wouldn't slosh out of the front or the back. Anterior pelvic tilt is this, where water would spill out the front. It causes a tightening of all the lower back muscles, and overuse of them. So if you have back pain and you look like this and you're walking around like that all the time, that's why your back hurts. So you need more posterior pelvic tilt, or a bit more slouching in the pelvis. I have a world's simplest posture fix, if that's what you're looking for, to fix that, okay? So, anterior pelvic tilt. I should be able to anterior, posterior. This is twerking. Back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. The fluidity at which you can do posterior to anterior pelvic tilting is very important. I might do something like a deadlift, where I end up with very excessive anterior pelvic tilt. A more neutral spine would be a better way to go. Worse would be if I was to go to pick something up with a rounded back like that, okay? So there are times when I go to pick for my phone, I should be anterior or posterior pelvic tilting. The point is, be able to do that. Most people can't, okay? So we've got side, side, up, down, okay? And then we have forward, backward with the hips. The next one, and this one is pretty tough, is can I separate my hips or shimmy them side to side? We have a shoulder girdle. The shoulder girdle goes up, down, forward and backward, okay? The hip girdle does a bunch of other stuff. We've already gone through that. Now, can I separate the shoulder girdle from my hip girdle? Most people, when they move their hips, they do this. You're moving your whole body. Your shoulder girdle and your hip girdle at times should move together. Like when I throw something, it's ideal that I throw with the hip complex and the shoulder complex at the same time. That's safer for your back. There's times when I shouldn't. So the point is, if I lock down the shoulder girdle, can I move my hips separate? If you can't do any one of those, side to side, if they don't feel even, if I can't hike one to the other, if I can't anterior, posterior, pelvic tilt or twerk, or I can't separate my shoulder girdle from my hip girdle, then you're going to end up with some kind of dysfunction in the hips, likely leading to pain. So work on the ones that you can't do. I know it's weird and funny, but it'll help.